in a village laden with drought, famine, and dying villagers. Rain falls as the prefecture is filled with the cries of a woman trying to give birth. While her husband waits outside, the man closes his eyes and remembers visiting the temple in the hills. What seems like a man going for daily prayers soon reveals to be a massacre of guards and priests in the temple's vicinity. He soon makes his way to the Hall of Hell, where he is greeted by the old main priest. The priest acts as if his action is expected, talking about how the man is there to denounce God and Buddha in favor of the 12 demons. After a bit of a futile attempt to stop him, the man kills the priest, who thanks him for salvation. The man begins his deal and reveals himself to be Daigo Kagemitsu, the governor of Ishikawa, and talks about the disaster taking place in his land, but he is worried more regarding his loss of power. Daigo then asks for the protection of his land and the power to rule over in exchange for anything of his. Suddenly, lightning strikes, and the demons mark a cross on his forehead to seal the deal. At present, Daigo's heir finally gives birth, but suddenly lightning strikes again, this time on the baby, which causes some of the midwives to run away. Daigo immediately runs inside and finds out he has a son, but he takes too much after him. He remembers that the reason his child is in a state of perpetual ugliness is due to the deal, which makes him happy as his wish is fulfilled. Daigo then orders his son's execution to the midwife as he reminds him of the ugliness inside him, but sees that the Buddha's statue had sacrificed its head, which makes him wary. Totally not a spoiler, of course. A demon is awakened as the old midwife takes the ugly baby to the river to drown him. But as she tries to drown him, she suddenly feels merciful and floats him down the river in a boat nearby. Suddenly, the demon appears and devours the baby, who weirdly gives no reaction upon seeing the demon meme of old Rose from Titanic saying, "It's been 84 years. A blind monk also happens to be nearby, and he uses his spidey sense to track and kill the demon with a swipe from his customized shamisen. The demon should learn not to mess with anime old guys. He also senses the ugliness from the boat, but lets him be as he's not evil. 16 years pass and mankind's favorite game, war and massacre, is still taking place. A priest is praying for the departed souls, but he sees Jukai, the doctor who has a weird fetish of attaching prosthetics to the dead bodies, although he claims that he does that to not waste away his creations. Meanwhile, a weird guy is passing by the city, who is pointed out to be wearing a mask by everyone he meets. In the city, we see a kid, Dororo, who's a student at Tate University, hustling out some goods. But he is stopped by some goons, who accuse him of stealing their stuff. The goons try to beat him up, but he manages to escape them with the help of some shit she flinged their way. He stops by the river but gets distracted by a puppy, which in turn causes the goon to get to him. They beat the ever-living shit out of him, but he does not give up. Must be a John Cena fan. Instead, he throws rocks at the leader, popping his eyes and making him intolerant of his shit before deciding to kill him. During the procession, the masked guy from earlier also arrives there. The goons try to negotiate with him, but Dororo explains how he is not looking at them but somewhere else. A garbage patch floats nearby as Mr. Mask looks at it intently, but the goons try to brush it off. But suddenly the patch turns out to be a demon, which catches and eats the goons in an instant. The blob also catches Dororo for dessert, but Mr. Mask suddenly whips out his blade hidden inside his arms. He manages to defeat the demon with the help of his hidden blades, and Dororo finds out that he cannot see or hear as he reattaches his limbs. As he begins to yap about how cool he is, suddenly his skin begins to appear on his face. I mean, the audience already knows who Mr. Mask is at this point. Also, Lord Daigo is on his highest alert as he sees lightning strike the temple, which reminds him of his mark. Worried, Daigo returns to the halls, but he is shocked to see one of the statues split open by the lightning from earlier, which shocks him, while a landslide occurs close to the hall. At his prefecture, he and his wife have a new child, Tahomaru, who exclaims about making his sick mother stronger from the dove he hunted. Daigo's wife, though, is worried about the son they killed. Looking at the headless statue, Jukai is still seen on the battlefield, but it seems he actually knows Mr. Mask or Hyakimaru, as he puts on a similar mask to the dead body. Meanwhile, Hyakimaru is still in shock due to his new face as Dororo questions if he is a human. The Spider-Man priest meets with a demon trying to make a deal at the crossroads. Meanwhile, Hyakimaru is being followed by Dororo, who yaps about how cool he is. Despite not hearing him, he could sense the blabbering, which makes him hungry. The two eat some berries before Hyakimaru catches some fish with his arm blade. As he tries to raw dog the fish, Dororo stops him and teaches him about cooking. Hyakkimaru then shows that he also has a spidey sense to sense the color of the soul besides having superhuman prowess, that is, he's basically a blind Spider-Man. He also allows Dororo to be close to him as he possesses no male intent but is surprised to see him not leave. As Jukai still remains on the battlefield attaching prosthetics to the dead, as if he's trying to repent for something, Dororo tries to converse with Hyakkimaru to no avail. But the demon from earlier watches the village. The next day, Hyakkimaru's fishing session is interrupted as Dororo forces a business proposition on him to kill a demon and rescue the villagers haunted by it. The two get to the rich village, and after Dororo's negotiation skills, the hesitant villagers' chief offers to give them a shot in return for payment and supper, which gets Dororo very excited. After supper, the duo are resting in the shed talking about the village's suspicious wealth, but are interrupted by the weird demon and his bell. Dororo tries to get Hyakkimaru to fight it, but suspiciously, the demon just asks a question but does no harm and leaves. The leader also pops out with a slight concern on his face. The next morning, the two are taken to meet the village priestess, Bandai, who is in no state of movement. As Dororo flatters her beauty, Hyakkimaru senses her soul and whips out his blade, but they get thrown to the dungeon for attempted murder. Dororo begins to yell at Hyakkimaru, but is interrupted by Spider-Man's Spider-Man theme. The priest was also captured when he arrived at the village to slay the demon. He then explains to Dororo how similar he is to Hyakkimaru, both being the Japanese variant of Spider-Man. But suddenly the light goes out, alerting everyone, and Hyakkimaru kills a demon that popped out in the well. The priest takes a panicked Dororo along with him, escaping through the same well and arriving at the doors of Bandai's room. Bandai still acts like she is suffering from Tyrone's backshots, but the priest describes how her soul is murky red, the worst soul color. Bandai then regrets not eating them before revealing herself as my mother-in-law. Hyakkimaru, who's blind as a bat, still could not bear Bandai's ugliness, lashing out and slashing its eyes. But the chief interrupts before he can finish her, allowing her to escape. The priest and Dororo then confront him, and he tells them how she would have eaten the villagers if they had not led travelers to her, trying to do the same with the main crew. But they assure him that they can slay and relieve them of her. Bandai and Hyakkimaru fight it out in the bamboo forest, where the demon tries to take advantage of her surroundings. Suddenly, the bell demon appears and distracts her, which allows him to deal the final blow. Bandai gets back to her human form, but she begins to talk cryptically about getting back, while transforming into another form. The chief and the crew arrive, and he sees his Lady Bandai finally get killed. The bell demon reappears and Dororo tries to get him, but he sees riches buried in the sand. The priest makes him confess that the coins belong to the first traveler they offered to Bandai and how they got rich from these offerings. Dororo reprimands him by telling him how they're worse than the monsters, but the bell rings again. The bell carried by the demon belonged to the traveler they sacrificed, which traumatizes the chief. He actually wanted them to slay that demon, but they let him be as a punishment. As they get out of the forest, Dororo apologizes for not knowing about Bandai, but the priest consoles him for getting bamboozled. He explains how she looked like his dead mom and gets touched by Hyakkimaru like a 2024 YouTuber seeing a minor, but he sensed a disturbance in his soul and tried to console him. He brushes him off, and then Hyakkimaru writes his name in the sand, letting them know his name. The priest is then assured of their previous meeting when he was an ugly child, happy that what he sensed back then was true. Meanwhile, his scumbag father, Daigo, is worried about getting his ass kicked by the Sakai clan, who he believed were his allies. But instead of strategizing, he asks his men to check the temple, where another statue is destroyed. Hyakkimaru struggles as he gets another one of his organs back, which might be his sense of pain, that is his nerves, worrying both the priest and Dororo. A long time ago, the battlefield was filled with the bodies of dead soldiers as their blood soaked the soil. A soldier tries to run away but is captured by Jukai, whose favorite movie, The Passion of Christ, was surpassed at the box office by Deadpool vs. Wolverine. So, Jukai, after learning that the opposition was Deadpool fans, crucified them with nails and hammers while allowing them to rot away. As he amputates another enemy soldier to warn the rebellion, Jukai's wife runs towards him to stop him, but she gets stabbed in the back by a fellow soldier and then ordered to be crucified. Seeing her dead body, regret creeps into his body, making him question everything, and starts crying. Jukai then suddenly tries to ice guy himself by jumping off a nearby cliff. But instead of becoming the make of an ice guy, Jukai becomes the doctor of a village, providing villagers with prosthetics, including his intern, Koname, who he helped when he was a little orphan. As the villagers and his intern praise him in equivalence to Buddha, they do not know his bloody past. Talking about his past, Kanem learns about it from a patient's mother, while he walks her home after her son's treatment. He confronts Jukai, who tells him everything including his days under the Tyrant Lord, how he learned about prosthetics, and trying to atone for his sins. But Kanem reveals that his father was killed in that war, instead of going to buy milk before lunging towards Jukai for the kill. Jukai, instead of pleading for his life, asks him to let him live until he fulfills the kid's treatment. But Kanem leaves him and his prosthetic after the treatment, telling him how he can never be his salvation, instead of killing him. After breaking down due to Kanem's departure, Jukai goes for a walk but trips before getting awakened by a boat. Inside, he sees something similar to a lady's tampon Hyakimaru that shocks him by being alive despite its condition, before taking it under his wings with teary eyes. Meanwhile, Daigo is elated to see his new child, but his wife is still worried about her older son, looking at the headless statue. 6 years pass by and the kid, now grown up and chock full of Jukai's prosthetics, is moving around the forest and helping Jukai with errands. Okay, but is everyone thinking what I'm thinking? Jukai also thinks of him as his new reason for living, talking about his will to survive despite his conditions. He then names him as Hyakimaru, advising him not to succumb to demons and other terrifying entities. Later, Hyakimaru is on his usual stroll in the forest, but gets attacked by a Pokemon. He dodges its attacks, but Jukai's timely intervention saves him. In the evening, they see more monsters hidden in their home as Jukai believes that they must be after Hyakimaru. A training montage follows with scenes of Hyakimaru kicking tons of monsters' asses, while a sneak peek of his family, including the bonding of his scumbag dad and his brother, Tahomaru, is also shown. A bloody Hyakimaru returns from his battle as Jukai tends to his wounds. He then describes how Hyakimaru feels no pain and remorse, knowing only how to kill before questioning his decision regarding training him. But he again risks his life to kill the alien from Alien vs. Predators, worrying Jukai again, but this time, he shocks him by growing a leg out of nowhere. As lightning strikes the temple again, destroying a demon statue, Jukai talks about making deals with demons, pointing out that Hyakimaru may also have been a part of such deals as he upgrades him with blades. Some days pass and Hyakimaru is let go by Jukai, who believes that he has a purpose. As he leaves, Jukai gives him his medallion back, but he caresses him, which makes him tearful, and hugs him as a heartfelt farewell. At present, the priest and Dororo talk about how Hyakimaru's body parts were dealt with by someone with demons in exchange for something. As they are chatting, Hyakimaru walks on the fire to see that he can feel pain now, much to Dororo's disapproval of his method. Meanwhile, Jukai is seen on a battlefield, praying as he yet again has attached prosthetics to dead soldiers. A battlefield is riddled with POWs as they're put in line for execution under high command. One of the executioners gets hesitant and pleads with the high command, but gets offered a sword, through which he executes the prisoner. Hyakimaru is getting wet in the rain as a girl Asushi tries to call him, but Dororo interferes and describes his condition. He then rizzes the girl, who's there to pray for her brother, but gets cock-blocked by someone injured. As Hyakimaru runs off after sensing something evil, Dororo also runs after him to find a trail of dead bodies. Suddenly, they're attacked by a white-haired bastard with a supernatural sword who looks like Herbert from Family Guy with hair. Dororo asks him about his deed, but the guy just yaps about his sword being thirsty before engaging in a duel with Hyakimaru. He gets cornered by the swordsman, who manages to slash his face, but uses his prosthetic leg to ward him off, throwing him off the cliff. Dororo arrives there to give him his arm, and while searching for his leg, he sees the sword as well. As he tries to get the leg back, he accidentally gets possessed by the sword. Asushi also gets to the foot of the cliff while searching for the boys, but is shocked to see her brother, the white-haired swordsman. Hyakimaru though senses that the sword has been taken out from his leg during his search for Dororo. Asushi reunites with her brother, who is afraid that the sword will return to him. Meanwhile, Dororo is struggling for control with the cursed sword, almost killing some passerby before giving up and letting the sword control him. As Hyakimaru senses the sword's presence, Asushi talks about their past with her brother, including their parents and him becoming a soldier before showing him the paper crane, but she feels that her brother has changed, remembering how he killed the passers-by near the cliff. Dororo, now dubbed the Phantom Killer, is dragged to the village where he's confronted by a battle-ready Hyakimaru. Asushi pleads with her brother to return home with her, but Tanasuke, her older brother, remembers his time in the army as an executioner from earlier. He remembers how he executed his fellow comrade and other pals with the cursed sword, Nairu, given to him by his chief, before killing him as well to quench its thirst. But he went on a killing spree as the sword seemed not to be satisfied, similar to Minecraft YouTubers on their Discord. At present, Tanasuke tries to get the sword back despite his sister's pleading as Dororo is being attacked by Hyakimaru. Hyakimaru manages to get rid of the sword from Dororo, but Tanasuke recaptures it and reignites their duel after questioning why he was not killed. The two engage in a fierce dance of death which alerts Osushi, who sees that her brother has created new paper cranes. She rushes out to plead for his life, but Hyakimaru slashes him fatally, killing him and the sword. Osushi realizes her brother's sacrifice, crying while holding his lifeless hand. Hyakimaru begins to frolic again as he gets his ears back and allows him to hear for the first time. Another statue gets taken out as Daigo's anxiety worsens after hearing that the midwife, who was assigned the task of killing his child, was nowhere to be found by his soldiers. Hyakimaru is trying to get some shut-eye, but since he unlocked his new super hearing DLC, he has to bear the noises of the most minute thing in the forest, including Dororo. As he jokes about Hyakimaru's sensitivity while putting a bow on him, suddenly a pterodactyl attacks them out of nowhere. The monster bird gets the better of Hyakimaru despite getting slashed by his arm blades, but gets slain by the Spider-Man priest. The priest chops up the pterodactyl and then gathers intel about Hyakimaru from Dororo before stopping him from going to the village as the war is brewing. The next morning, Hyakimaru is awakened by a beautiful singing voice that he follows and gets to a beautiful girl, Mio, in the river. Bro is so enchanted by her voice and her soul that he tries to touch her but falls into her arms due to his weak condition. The priest and Dororo then take him to Mio's house for healing, where she introduces them to the injured war orphans. One of the outspoken ones, Takibo, asks her to rest while he takes care of the guest. Dororo then begins a new friendship with him as he talks about Mio's night job of serving the soldiers, which hints at prostitution before being interrupted by the priest, who goes out again to buy some milk. Meanwhile, Lord Daigo is getting gangbanged by an array of trouble from betrayal by his ally, Sakai, and now a drought. His wife also adds insult to the injury by talking about their empire crumbling away, which annoys Tahomaru and rushes Daigo to take care of matters quickly. Dororo helps the orphans out in his quirky way, while Mio checks up on Hyakimaru, who tries to touch her but fumbles again as she has to go for her job. She sings all the way, which triggers him, reaching his hand out and surprising Dororo. But does he get a boner because the boy is horny? Meanwhile, the priest follows some animals to get away from the war in the safest way, but he senses a monster lurking beneath. Mio returns in the morning and sees Hyakimaru waiting for her on the stairways. She shows him the medicine but gets embarrassed, talking about his soul-piercing gaze. Dororo gets there and describes his ability to see the souls of creatures, including monsters, which makes her feel more embarrassed and guilty. Well, that's just sad. Suddenly, Hyakimaru points at her lips and mouths something, which Dororo interprets as him requesting the song from her instead of his unspoken riz. This excites Dororo, who sees it as an opportunity to acclimatize him to sounds. Despite some hesitation, Mio gives in and starts to sing, which keeps both boys at peace while also increasing the simp meter of Hyakimaru. The priest also arrives there after failing to get the milk with some good news and bad news. He tells them about the new hideout, but also warns them about the monster lurking beneath. Hyakimaru, seeing this as an opportunity to impress Mio, heads out for a monster hunt despite his injuries and Dororo's nagging. The priest also follows him while Mio gets ready to work even harder. As the priest worryingly follows an injured Hyakimaru, Mio decides to work for both participants of the war to get the most benefit as they're moving to the new place. This worries Takibo, who unsuccessfully tries to persuade her, and Dororo, who decides to go with her to her work as her unofficial bodyguard. The priest and Hyakimaru get to the monster's den, where suddenly it pulls them towards the pincers. Both of them get some offense despite the moving sand, but the monster is quite deadly as it hacks off one of Hyakimaru's legs, shocking the priest. Meanwhile, the nightmare that everyone watching did not hope for came true as Mio is seen seducing some goofy asses near the camp. Dororo gets to the camp to find her, but is traumatized to see her getting down with some soldiers, even though she does not enjoy it. So, she sadly is a prostitute. F's in the chat, boys. A traumatized Dororo gets more traumatized as he meets the priest and a monopodial Hyakimaru. But with some solace, he learns that his voice has returned. Mio also returns from her job, but Takibo notices that she has bruises on her body, which she hides as an injury from getting tripped. He then talks about Hayakamuru's situation, which prompts her to run to him and start his care even though it's her rest time. Dororo also notices her bruises, which traumatizes him enough to make him run away, surprising the priest. He throws a big rock to let out his pent-up frustration but gets interrupted by Takibo. Dororo asks him if he knows about Mio's work, but seeing that he's blissfully ignorant as he yaps about golden paddy fields, he just listens to him. Bro just raised a red flag. In the mansion, Tahomaru gets rejected to join the war by Daigo, which angers him. He then tries to ask his mom but gets rejected. This angers Taho, who lashes out at his mother for not loving him despite his proficiency in hunting and martial arts before going for hunting despite the realization. While hunting, Taho gets commented on his behavior from earlier by his mates, which angers him. But he then thinks about how his father and mother are hiding something from him despite their love for him. Hayakameru is disappointed by his encounter with the monster, which prompts him to go after it again, but he instead falls flat on his face. Mio rushes to pick him up, asking him not to rush himself. She then requests to hear his voice, but he rejects her as he is sensitive to the sound. She sings him his favorite tune, which keeps him at peace while Dororo and the priest quietly spy on them. The priest then leaves again, but this time he tells Dororo about how Hayakameru still has traces on his body due to the demon. He then talks about how Mio's song seems to calm him down before warning him about the possibility of him turning into a demon. Meanwhile, Hayakameru again rizzes Mio up by holding her face, which she enjoys as well. He has got the unspoken riz. On the battlefield, Daigo's army plans a surprise attack against Sakai's troops, while also warning about enemy spies. Mio heads out for her work, but she meets Dororo on the stairways. She talks with him about how he found out about her job for survival, but Dororo tells her that it's okay. But Bro raises a death flag by talking about how his mom also died while trying to avoid such work, but he motivates her to take back what the war took from them, including the golden paddy fields, before running away from embarrassment. Hayakameru tries to create a prosthetic leg as Dororo feeds him and begs to hear his voice before asking him if he will turn into a monster as the priest predicted. Mio though sells her soul as she sings her song, trying to escape the horrid reality she has subjected herself to. God him, this is awful. Hayakameru impresses the orphans with his new leg and his arm blades, while Mio leaves for work after requesting Dororo to not let Hayakameru go after the monster. The orphans then show him their sword collection, but as Mio gets closer to the camp, she is spied on by a soldier. Later in the morning, Dororo wakes up to find that Hayakameru has gone to battle the monster again. As he chases after to stop him, Mio also gets there and rushes after hearing the news from Takibo. But the soldiers also get there after following her. Suddenly, it begins to rain as Dororo gets to the pit to stop Hayakameru, who is almost eaten by the monster, but this time he has a trump card up his leg, which he uses to land the killing blow and get his leg back. Meanwhile, the rain stops, but a grim scene follows showing Takibo getting slashed while the temple burns. Another demon is sliced in half as the rain stops, which worries the scumbag, Daigo. Dororo rushes to the temple to see the orphans and Mio killed brutally under spy allegations before he's caught by one of the soldiers. As he tries to deliver the killing blow, Hayakameru slices off his arm clean. Dororo tends to Mio and take, but she sings her song under her dying gasps. Hearing that, Hayakameru finds out that she is dying, which angers him enough to go berserk. Guts shouting Griffith in a fit of rage, he begins to slash the soldiers so brutally that it scares Dororo. Before he can wipe off the last soldier, Dororo calms him down before showing that Mio had brought the rice seeds. A calmed Hayakameru then tragically embraces Mio while whispering her name before the temple burns to ruins. They bury their bodies in between the ruins before heading off as Mio's song is heard and her dream golden paddy field is shown. Still, not over the earlier events, Dororo remembers Hayakameru's brutal killing while also remembering what the priest told him. Trying to get out of the somber, he tries to tickle him to make him laugh but fails. Suddenly, he hears some couple trying to bang, which prompts him to hurl stones in the bushes. But a basket drops from the top before he sees a giant spider monster. Hayakameru also notices her and launches to attack. The two then engage in a fight, but she sprays white fluid on him before running away. They then follow her to a village, but she is hiding to replenish her energy. As she recharges, the two get a traveler pass from the village guard while getting informed about the kidnapping of villagers. They then wait to take on the spider monster while she transforms from a spider to Scarlett Johansson. Later in the morning, a man, Yujiro, sees the spider lady lying on the floor and invites her to his crib while she plans to suck out his life force by giving him the Guac Guac 3000. At his crib, he names her Ohagi before offering her something to eat. Despite some hesitation and her tsundere behavior, she finds the food delicious as Yajiro, the simp, offers her to stay there while he goes to work. Yup, definitely gonna be a tragic ending. As Dororo and Hyakimaru scour the village for food, they get to a crowd of people looking at a notice. He then asks Yajiro, who tells them about the reward for those who capture the kidnapper. A confident Dororo tells him that the kidnapper is a monster before hinting to Hyakimaru. They then wait for the monster as Yajiro gets home to Ohagi after seeing his coworkers die again. The two begin to talk about their day, but she asks him about the worth of his work. He then gets rid of a cockroach near her, but is surprised to see him not kill it. He then serves her food as he answers her question on the value of life, which gets her wet. Later at night, Ohagi tries to suck him off, but as she has fallen for him, she refuses to do so, waiting to hold hands with him before anything rated R. Which means that Yajiro is no longer a simp, but rather a Chad about to munch some demon cooch. In the early dawn, Dororo and Hyakimaru catch up on some sleep after a night of being vigilantes, but later they learn from another notice that a man has been taken yet again. Meanwhile, Ohagi is getting weaker as time passes as she cannot suck anyone dry. Yajiro gets home. He then plans to free her out of the village later that night, which makes her quite happy. As we see the boys munching on some weeds due to lack of food, they decide to patrol the area. Meanwhile, Ohagi and Yajiro run towards the secret passage, but suddenly Hyakimaru and Dororo get to them. The couple recognizes the boys from their respective meetings, while Dororo reveals that she is a monster to Yajiro. Despite knowing about her monster origins, he decides to protect her, shocking Dororo. Dororo tries to bargain that she's the kidnapper, but he reveals that it's him who's the kidnapper, but he helps people escape the village. He pleads with them to let her go, but suddenly the village guards also get there after finding out the truth. They try to capture Yajiro, but Ohagi eats some of them. Hyakimaru senses her soul and goes on the offense, but gets tangled in her web while the two escape. Hyakimaru goes after her after being freed towards the cliff while the guards call for reinforcements. After getting to the top using her spider powers, Yajiro learns about Ohagi's sucking business, but he's not shaken, instead rizzing her up. They get to the escape route, and as he plans to leave her there, she asks him to come along. Man has the anime protagonist Riz. He gets a bit hesitant but decides to get sucked by her for life. Suddenly, they get attacked by a hail of arrows, some of which strike him, angering her. In her rage, she transforms back to her monster form and wraps everyone up, but Hyakimaru gets there in time. The two engage in a battle where he manages to slice her leg off while she pins him to the wall. But instead of finishing him, she goes after Yajiro with a promise to take him to a doctor. Hyakimaru gets ready for another battle, but to his shock, he sees her soul change in color, which has him lowering his sword. The next day, it's shown that the two lovers escaped from the rout, not a sad ending as expected, as Dororo talks about the weirdness of such a relationship before being laughed at by Hyakimaru. After a heavy rainstorm, a village is about to be engulfed by a forsaken cloud with rains of ashes, which puts the villagers in panic and makes them run for offerings. Dororo and Hyakimaru are walking through the craters but are surprised to see a bride being taken. Suddenly, a furry appears out of nowhere and tries to arrow the people, but gets stopped by Dororo. He threatens him, but after learning that the two have killed some monsters, he tells them about how his big sister was chosen as an offering to the forsaken cloud. Dororo then offers him the monster killing service after finding out that the furry, named Saru, knows how to find more gold. The three then get to the place of offering and manage to knock the guards out. But Saru's sister suffers from a bit of a savior complex, talking about how she will save everyone including Saru due to her offering. Dororo appears to tell her about how Hyakimaru will slay the beast, but they get shrouded by the cloud out of nowhere, which takes the guards' lives. Dororo commands him to attack, but Hyakimaru's senses are overloaded. Suddenly, the centipede appears out of nowhere and manages to chomp up the sister before running away as it gets hit by the sun due to the geyser. Dororo breathes a sigh of relief, but Saru is angered by the events that took place. Later, he gets to his hideout and learns that Saru is an orphan who became Terrazin and was driven away by the villagers but had grown a liking to his big sis, as she reminded him of his mother. The duo then observes that the cloud has become bigger due to the centipedes molting before devising a plan to bring it out in the sunlight to save the big sister. Hyakkimaru, meanwhile, is disappointed due to his cloud overstimulation. The next day, Dororo disguises as the bride as the monster reappears and barely manages to escape him despite his agility. Saru then proceeds their plan further and manages to burn it with fire arrows and waits for it to melt away in the sun. But the centipede does not budge, managing to block the sun as well. The centipede goes on the offense before being distracted by Hyakkimaru, who uses the sound from the arrows to successfully strike the monster. The monster awakes again and strikes him, but Dororo understands that he is using sound to locate the monster. So, he jumps and ties himself to the monster's head to guide him but gets knocked out. Hyakkimaru then tries to call him in gibberish while blocking the monster before delivering the killing blow to its eye, courtesy of Dororo. The centipede is taken out to the sun but tries to attack again, but this time it gets slashed horizontally. They then land in the spring, including the big sister, and Hyakkimaru gets his nose back, only to smell the volcanic sulfur. The two then continue onwards as Dororo is disappointed with Saru's gold, but happy that he's taken in by his big sister. She offers them a flower, which Hyakkimaru smells before offering it to Dororo by calling out his name and surprising him.